part 2. So here we have Karl, and he's a designer at Pandora's next week now. Yeah. And this title of the talk is so Karl.
How's everybody doing? How about those technical problems? You guys hear me okay? No levels? No one's frowning, that's good. I'm here to talk to you about some things about D3 that I wish I knew 2 years ago. First, a quick question for the room. Who among you is brave enough to admit to being a beginner when it comes to D3? Show of hands. All right. Yes. Good. You will not be bored to tears by my talk. That's excellent. Is there anybody here who considers himself an expert inside the audience? A few. Okay, that's great. Anybody who had their hand up a second ago, find those people that just rose their hand and ask them for advice and help in the future. They will teach you a lot because they know what they're talking about. Myself, especially 2 years ago, I had no idea what I was talking about when it came to D3. I was confused Jackie Chan over here. I spent some time in processing. I love processing. I knew something about HTML and CSS, but jumping into D3 was super challenging. It's a difficult thing to get into. And what I want to talk over for you guys is some of the things that I've learned in the past 2 years that help me get to a place where I can design something like this. This is a project I finished recently. It's also an article on Medium if you want to check it out, about the micro-districts inside of Manhattan. I wrote a scraper to get some data from a certain website, which will be anonymous, and highlighted a bunch of different, like, tiny little neighborhoods. I think here on 28th Street, there was a string of 2 streets where it was just outdoor nurseries, the whole place you walk. And I really, looking back at myself 2 years ago, couldn't believe that I'd be able to do this, and couldn't believe that I'd be at the D3 meetup telling people how I got here too. So these days, I feel a lot more like this Jackie Chan. I'm not that good, but I feel that way sometimes. So I'm going to go through a few things you guys today, some tools that you're going to need, the way to get started with the D3 sketch, and then some tips about manipulating data. You might notice that I'm not going to talk about graphics at all, which is super strange for me, given that my background is in design. There are a lot of amazing tutorials out there on the internet that will give you the basics for D3. Walk you through how to make a line graph, how to make a bar graph, how to make any kind of graph you want. Especially like Scott Murray, for example, has a whole host of amazing introductory stuff to D3. But one thing I always found kind of lacking was some fundamentals about JavaScript and just manipulating basic data like CSVs and JSON files. So hopefully I can pepper you guys with some, some tidbits that might kind of help get some blockers out of the way for you guys, get you closer to feeling like this Jackie Chan when you're working with D3. Quick note for everybody. If you want to see my slides, they're at my Twitter right now. I posted them at 4 o'clock this afternoon. I'm going to try to keep this thing tight. It's already 8:20, and I know everybody has probably something else going on Monday night right before holidays. So please feel free, check this out, use it, copy paste the shit out of my code. I guarantee it's good enough. Hopefully you learn something from it, right? After this, we're just going to go through a lot of examples, and there's going to be a lot of candor. I'm going to embarrass myself hopefully, so let's get started with some basic tools. Is anybody, when they started mucking around with D3, seen this error and been incredibly discouraged by it when you try to load a data file outside of your HTML and your JavaScript? This drove me insane and always made me feel so incredibly sad on the inside. I didn't know how to get my browser when I was looking with local files to pull from a different file to get data, like a fundamental thing you might have to do with D3 to like visualize something. So I Googled this error, and it looks really complicated. It tells me about setting up a local server, and then I panic because I don't know what the hell that is. And to me, the server is a box that lives in a room somewhere else, probably in Idaho or something. I don't know if I can run into security issues, if I can break my computer. It's the first super steep cliff that you're going to run into when you get get started with D3 at home. And the good news is it's pretty easy to take care of it. Setting up a local server is not incredibly complex. It's also something that there are probably a dozen or two different ways to do so. The easiest way for me has been to fire up terminal on Mac, install Node on your computer. Again, there's a link in the presentation, so you can go Google that, check out how to do it. I'm not going to bore you with those details. And then all you have to do in terminal, 2 lines to type in. Really awesome. npm install HTTP server -G. No package manager, install your local server, -G makes it local. Then all you have to do anywhere when you're on your computer is type HTTP-server. And you've got a local server set up in your box. Next problem. Browser, there's 3 things you're going to be doing with your browser typically, I found. Number 1 is an incredible amount of testing and refreshing. I have tried in the past sometimes to just write something out the whole way through, load it in my browser, and pray that it's going to work the first time. And of course it never, ever, ever does. You prepare to test and refresh the shit out of anything you're writing. You're also going to use that right click to inspect all the time, not just your own work, but if you really want to start scoring some bonus points when you're on a site, or especially in a visualization you like, open up the inspector. A lot of times it's really easy to get an idea of how somebody built visualization just by looking at their code. And then finally, Googling. If there's one thing that everybody can take away from this presentation, it's 3 letters, A, B, G. A, always, B, B, G, Googling. There's nothing to be afraid of in terms of asking the internet for help. I always felt 2 years ago overwhelmed at how much I had to check something, Google something, figure out how to do something. And what I've learned by talking to some people who know a whole lot more than I do about D3 is that it's a perpetual thing you need to do. There's so much to learn, you're always going to be learning, so don't be afraid to always be learning. I have more links. These are really the 2 most important sort of tools on the internet that I'd love everybody to check out. Number 1, Mike Bostock's own writing about D3 is, the best reference to go through. He has a dozen really great essays that can reveal the way he thinks about D3. And given that D3 all came from his genius brain, that's probably the best place to turn to understand how D3 works. The language can be a little tough to get through. If you're not a programmer, if you are a programmer, I've heard they love it because it's hyper-specific and totally clear what's going on. My advice to people who are not programmers is to bear with it and to just try to get something out of it by reading it over and over again, like I certainly have. Another tool by Shan Carter is called Mr. Data Converter. I wouldn't know how to do anything essentially without this tool. It's a simple website where all you do is copy in some tabular data, like from a CSV file, drop it in, and it outputs a JSON file for you to copy into your report. Easiest thing in the world. Use it all the time. I would recommend it. Next, getting started with D3. Do some basic stuff, just some basic questions that I had 2 years ago when I was still trying to read some examples on D3 and figure out what the hell was going on. One thing that always tripped me up at the beginning is I had no idea what a G was. And if you try to Google the letter G, it's not entirely either. The good news is it's really simple. G stands for group. It's just an SVG group. And it's an incredibly useful tool when it comes to writing D3. You're going to see it in all the code examples that I'm about to put up for you guys, including for the fundamental element of D3, which is the data join. Not to be confused with the JavaScript join. It's more like the way that you bind data to elements on your HTML page. And it looks, something simple like this. I have some data. It's an array of 3 numbers. I join it to a variable that I already have called SVG, create a selection, input the data, call my other selection, and then I append a group which loops through all 3 of those data points, give it a class, container, simple as that. And you can see one of the coolest tricks about being able to do the data join inside the browser is that you can inspect elements inside the browser and using the highly intuitive code $0, period, underscore, underscore, data, underscore, underscore, see if your data joins work. I don't know if you can really, okay. SVG element highlighted here, and you can see down in the console that I typed in that phrase. And it's shown me, A, that the fact that I can even execute that command in the console, that my data has been joined to that element. And it tells me what I could access when going through and building my D3 visualization. I didn't know this until a couple months ago, and it totally changed my life. And again, like I kind of hinted, G makes everything all better. It makes your code a lot more easy to read, which makes it more maintainable. When you have to come back to the sketch after 6 months, you have no idea what you were thinking or what you were doing. And it makes, although there might be a little more upfront writing to, do a join, add a G, and then start appending like the circles, the text, or the rectangles that you want to drop in there, it makes those steps a whole lot easier. Like initially, maybe a year ago when it was starting to get into the D3 mode, this is how I might write something. Got my data, create my selection to the things that don't exist because that is totally intuitive about D3. Enter my data, give it the attributes for my data that I want to give it, and give it a certain radius value. Now that will work, especially for a simple sketch, but if I want to come back and start to add other visual elements, or especially get some kind of label, holy shit, I have to write all this all over again, and that becomes hard to think about, a hot mess when you're typing it up, and probably it's going to break something somewhere along the line. What G's do allow you to create a group inside of your SVG, move it around. There's a few things you can do with G's. They don't accept any kind of styling attributes, but you can translate them. So I move it to the XY coordinates that I want to give it inside of my sketch, and then to that group, I can append a circle. You see how nice and beautiful and clean those two rows of code are? Fantastic. And now, if I want to extend what I'm working on, adding text to this would be as simple as adding another 2 or 3 lines of code underneath it. So G's are your friends. You see them, now you know what they're mean. Another technique you guys may notice is selecting with classes. A really basic way to append something to your SVG is to just make your selection on the elements that don't exist, as T3 asks you to do, append those elements to your circle, and then we're giving them some kind of attribute. Now, again, for a simple sketch, this totally works. But if you get into a realm where you have multiple circles inside your sketch that might have different things you want to do with them, like move them at different times, you get them in different circles, circle is not really specific enough, and everything is just going to go to shit for you. What you want to do is add a class that helps you make a really specific selection on that element. It makes things a lot clearer, more retainable, and doesn't give you as many nasty surprises. This is such an important thing to do. I lost 2 hours of my life this past Friday because I thought I had written a selector that was specific enough, and I hadn't. And my sketch was totally messed up. I had no idea what was going on until I finally was able to zoom in and write a really nice specific class for it. D3 margin convention. This is a tough one. Kind of hard to learn about it until somebody tells you about it, like I was told about it in class on D3. This is the address for the postdoc block that explains what it is. But generally speaking, SVG starts top left at the 0, 0 origin point, and because that's totally intuitive. And what you do with D3 margin convention is specify the margin you want for your sketch, and then you append a G, an inner G, and move it to the left and down from that origin point. This makes it easier for you to use things like the D3 built-in scales and axes and all that really amazing stuff that comes baked into D3. This is an example of what the code looks like. Again, if you guys don't know what this is, I implore you, open up my presentation and just copy paste this code. I do that all the time with my own stuff. You set a margin variable with the different parameters for margin that you want. Here I'm just saying 20 pixels all the way around. You define the width and height of your sketch, and then as you loop through and select the body, of your HTML, append the SVG to it, give it the height and width you want, and append a G within it that you move over and down. It's just the way Mike thinks D3 should work, and Mike's word is law when it comes to D3, because this is how D3 works. Finally, something that didn't occur to me until I was encouraged to do so, when you're writing something in D3, it's really beneficial beneficial to make an outline for yourself, which should have been a really obvious thing for me. My background stems all the way back from history, and I would never dream of writing a paper without writing an outline. I do UX now, and I really wouldn't dream of doing wireframes without writing out some kind of outline that described what I wanted to do, what elements I needed to show, what is the flow for a user, that sort of thing. But it never occurred to me inside of code to just write an outline for myself to kind of think through at first what I thought code needed to do, and then go ahead and do it. This is an example of actual code, something I wrote up for myself. You can see where I'm probably going to create a for loop, where I'm going to want to define some parameters. Super helpful technique. Encourage everybody to get into it. Final section here, data. It's a full-time noise. Great. Number one, first step, of course, you got to load your data. This is how I've always done it, by having a callback function inside of the parser that you're going to need to use. If you want to look at CSVTs of your JSON files. I honestly have been using this for so long that I don't even remember what goes wrong if you don't do this sort of pattern. So again, please, by all means, if you're struggling to getting started with D3, just copy and paste this code for me. Keep using it. I copy pasted it from somebody else. I'm trying to just pay it forward to some people. Great. Next, another thing that I probably had to do in every single D3 sketch I've ever done is format that data with bridge loops, because that data is very rarely ever in the form that you need it to be to create your D3 sketch. I'll give you an example. My data, oh boy, these numbers came in strings. That sucks. What am I going to do about that? 2 years ago, I wouldn't have a clue. Probably shut my computer or do something different. Now, because I have the for each loop accessible to me, I go through with this beautiful little shorthand. By putting a plus sign in front of dx, I convert it to a number. I just move through that data, convert it to the form that I want. Something that's also really cool about for each loop is that you can create your own parameters as you're going through. So if for whatever reason I want to create the sum of those x and y values, I can do it right here. Super easy. I was really surprised getting started how many times I've been using functions. They are really the core of being able to make D3 sketch work, because you use them to loop through the data that you joined to return things like the x, y parameters that you might want to add for moving circles or whatnot around, or for even being able to access text within your data, print that inside the SVG. Anytime you're trying to get data out and put it on your SVG or whatever you're using, you're probably going to have to use some kind of function. Then finally, last tip is use console log with reckless abandon. I probably, when I'm being ambitious and trying something new, end up logging every single line of code, or at least it feels like it, because really there are a few other ways to know exactly what's going on with your sketch at any given moment. Here's a couple examples of which you can do that. Once your data's loaded, just check to see what kind of data came in and what the browser was looking at. I got a pro tip from one of my coworkers this afternoon that you can add a string before you print in your variable data here to kind of help you know which thing you're printing at any given moment. Also, after you've done your data for each loop, check to see if everything came out the right way. Every step of the way, it's so much better to build slowly, incrementally, and see if things work the way you expect them to, rather than trying to do it all at once. Something that I couldn't really even believe at first was, if I'm adding, going through attributes and use that function, to return a radius here, I can put a little SQL console log right inside that function and make sure that even at this specific little level, that my sketch is doing what I expect it to. So yeah, console log is your friend. Use it as often as you like. There's a lot more stuff that I would have gotten to if I had infinite time to talk about D3 with you guys, including a lot of the different visual forms, or some of the really awesome interactive stuff, which seems practically impossible when you're getting started, but when you learn how to do it, holy cow, it's actually pretty easy, and you feel like a god when things are dancing around inside your SVG. Once again, I have about 15 or so different examples that those all link to. Again, these are all inside the presentation. Please, by all means, check it out online, look for some examples. I try to write them as clean and copyable as possible. A, because I am using this page all the time when I'm trying to use E3, because I cannot possibly keep it all inside of my head. But B, hopefully it's useful to somebody else. And on that note, that's my presentation. Thanks, everybody.
Anybody got questions? Yeah.
I'll just shout it. Do you have any examples of work you've done that you can show us?
Oh, examples of work? Yeah, sure, I could do that.
Okay.
This is that page I was just telling you guys about. I'll load a couple up. Here is, well, I showed you first kind of like quickly this Medium sketch or Medium post that I did with a bunch of different maps in New York City, which was a lot of fun because, you know, I love this place and I love looking at data about it. Learned a lot of exciting things through this experience. I also made this sketch about the different moon systems of the solar system. This was literally 2 years in the making. This was a sketch that confused Jackie Chan and me, who was working on 2 years ago. He didn't know anything about what he was doing, and finally, after 2 years, I've gotten to a place where I can actually, you know, build something like this. It even has little sliders here, which you can control like how big the moons are and, you know, how fast they, you know, do orbit. It's all scale. It's really fun. Big space nerd, so, you know, this was a proud moment for me. I also, if you guys saw the post about remixing visualizations, that was really hot back in March. Give or take, it was on Medium. I decided to take it kind of seriously. I asked Georgia Lupi from Accurate Forward Dataset for that visualization of the 100 best novels and authors, and I couldn't believe it when she got back to me within inside of 4 hours and sent me the whole Excel spreadsheet she worked with to create her visualization, which I thought was absolutely incredible. And by seeing that Excel spreadsheet, I discovered how much work her and her team had actually gone through to do this visualization that they published. So that was like a really amazing experience in itself. And then I personally had a fun time just kind of experimenting with that data, trying to like take what I loved about the sketch that they had done, but translate it to something that I liked a little more. And for me, it's actually like warmed me up a little bit to just like embellishments and making something beautiful, even if it isn't necessarily 100% like core clean data viz. That's where I kind of came from 6 months ago, and I'm starting to realize the importance of beauty too. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
About
that's
citizen
great.
work?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
What's a good resource for learning deep grade?
Great question. Like I said, there are a lot of great tutorials. I wish I actually had that slide of a couple of things. Scott Murray has an incredible number of like basic step-by-step instructions, which I've referenced a lot. Also, my postdocs posts. I took I'm not a plant, I swear, but I took an awesome course at Metis for 6 weeks with Kevin Queeley, or a couple of my classmates who were there in the audience tonight. I had a fantastic experience, and it's what really turned the corner for me. It was a 2-night-a-week class, 3 hours at a time. And, like, all these questions that I had got answered. That was really incredibly helpful.
Okay.
Cool.
Cool.
Thanks, guys, for your time.